Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 99. I am your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan. If he can't do it, well, you fill in the blank this week. And this is the world's first podcast, the very first in the world, fully dedicated 150% to celebrating the art, craft, history, romance, and tradition of wooden boats around the world. You'll notice today I put the romance before the tradition. I just realized that those descriptors or adjectives were not all in alphabetical order before. Oh, my OCDC, ACDC, obsessive compulsive, whatever that is coming out a little bit. Anyway, welcome to the podcast today. It's great to have you on board. As you probably know by now, this podcast is about getting in the wooden boat game, which I should warn you now, once you get in, you'll never get out. It becomes a hopeless addiction. But the good news is it's really, really, really fun and a great way to spend time. So I would encourage you to become addicted, actually, and join us other addicts. Today's featured segment is an interview with Jeff Hammond of the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building in Port Townsend. Okay, I'm inserting a correction here. The school is in Port Hadlock, not Port Townsend, and I know that. Anyway, back to the podcast. Jeff is the chief instructor at the school. He's been there since the mid-'80s. And actually today is the first in a series of interviews I'm going to do over the next few months called Interview an Expert. And I'm going to do 6 interviews on the 6 main boat building methods, which I discuss in my eBook, which I'll talk about in a minute. And these methods are Carvel, Lapstrake or clinker, stitch and glue, skin on frame, cold molded, and strip planked. And so today, Jeff is going to discuss the ins and outs of Carvel planking, which has been around since the 14th century. It's a very focused podcast on that building method, and it's really cool. I learned a lot. Jeff is really good at this stuff, been doing it for a long time, so you'll want to stick around for that interview. This past Saturday, I attended the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building's Rendezvous, their annual rendezvous celebrating the anniversary of the school. I believe it's 33 years now. I think I'm pretty close there. It was really a fun event. 2 brand new, or I should say newly built scamps got launched. One was Zephyr, that's owned by Keith out of Portland, Oregon, a beautiful blue boat. And the other one is owned by Terry and his wife that live in the Port Townsend area called Skoll. Another beautiful boat. So both of those boats got launched for the first time that day at the school, which was really cool. And I took some short video of those launchings, which if you go to my YouTube channel, if you go to youtube.com/woodenboatdan, you'll be able to check those videos out. They're like half a minute or a minute in length, but it's pretty cool stuff. I'm pretty excited because, as you know, I am building a scamp myself. So I hung out at the rendezvous, got to hook up with John Welsford and Howard Rice, who were there getting ready for the scamp camp which started this past Monday. And I actually got to sail on a scamp for the first time with Howard, which was really fun. The maneuverability of these boats is amazing. You can literally just hold the tiller all the way over and the boat will just go in circles and jibe and nobody goes overboard or gets hurt. It's pretty amazing. It was a beautiful day, very sunny, lots of great boats there. Had a super fun time. Didn't do any interviews, but did take some videos and some photographs and stuff, so that was pretty cool. Little update on my scamp. whose name is For Sale 1, or Forsel 1, depending on how you'd like to pronounce that. The update now is that I've got 115 hours into her build and $4,210 in costs. I only spent 10 hours on her this last week, mainly because I spent probably 40 or 50 hours working on my ebook. I worked on making sure that the seat tops fit properly, because once you start gluing things together, the bulkheads can move a little bit, so I had to do just a little bit of trimming, maybe 1/8 of an inch on a couple of the slots of the seat tops that go over the bulkheads. And then I sanded the fillets in the stowage and bulkhead areas of the boat, because I wanted to get those sanded before I started planking the boat, because they're just much easier to get to, so I spent some time doing that. And then yesterday I hung the port garboard, which is pretty exciting. I got one plank on the boat. So that's pretty cool. And as far as materials that I purchased in the last week, I bought some more fillet material, which is, I bought some high and low density filler, and I bought some paint for the inside of the boat, because I'm probably going to paint forward of bulkhead 3, which is an area that once you put on the cabin and the deck top, it's pretty hard to get to it. So I thought it'd be a good idea to paint that here pretty soon. So I ordered some paint. Anyway, the Scamp's coming along great. I'm hoping to have it fully assembled before the September 6th Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival. I do plan having her there for sale. You can check more updates on my Scamp if you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/scamp. And by the way, Scamp is spelled S-C-A-M-P. Anyway, I've got details and photographs and things there on that page, so check it out when you get a minute. Okay, next week is episode 100, which I'm really excited about. I've got a couple surprise interviews I'm going to play, and we're going to have some fun with it, so be sure and check back next week for that episode. I am publishing my first ebook on August 15th. The title of it is Get in the Wooden Boat Game, A Guide for Building Your First Boat. And I'm really excited about it. The book's coming out great. I'm just wrapping up a few details on it right now. It's about 38 pages long, and it's got color photographs in it, all of which I've taken myself, which I'm pretty proud of. And I'm having my graphic artist who did the logo for my website design the cover, and that's coming out great. It's going to be a great guide for people that are thinking about building a wooden boat, but don't know exactly where to start, which building method they should use, or should you buy a kit, or should you buy the material yourself, what size boat do you want to build, how much is it going to cost, how long is it going to take, all those questions, which can be a little overwhelming when you're first getting in the wooden boat game. The book will be available as a PDF file, and I'm going to run a special deal where when I publish a book on August 15th, if you subscribe to my newsletter or are a current subscriber from August 15th through September 9th of 2013, you get the book for free. After that, I'll be selling the book for $4.99, which is still a great deal, I think. If you want more information, go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/ebook1, which is the number 1, or you can just go and subscribe to my newsletter, hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe, and then you'll receive an email from me next week with a code that will allow you to obtain the book for free. I would really encourage you to do that. I think it's turned out really good. I'm having a blast writing it. I've probably got 150 hours or more into the book. It's required a lot of research, but it's really been fun to do the research, and I've learned a ton, and I think it's a valuable resource for folks that are just starting out and want to build a boat. So check it out. There are a couple of resources I wanted to mention. First of all, Russell Brown has just published an ebook on using epoxy, and Russell and Ashlyn own PT Watercraft, Port Townsend Watercraft in Port Townsend, Washington. Russell's an expert with epoxy at making fillets and building boats with epoxy construction. His book is available through my website. If you go to my homepage and you look on the right-hand side there's a picture of the book. It's $5.99. And if you purchase it through my website, I get paid a small commission. I purchased the book myself. It's excellent, got some great tips in it, lots of photographs and how-to information. So if you do epoxy work, I would recommend you purchase the book. And thank you in advance if you do make a purchase for the small commission that I'll make on that. Also, the Goujon Brothers boat building book, which normally costs $42, is available as a free PDF download for a limited amount of time. If you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/free book, that'll direct you to the website where you can download it. It's got great information. It's got some real technical information and some how-to information. And if you're using epoxy, it's a great book to have, so I'd recommend you grab that one for free. The Port Townsend, Washington Wooden Boat Festival is September 6th through 8th this year. So that's about 4 weeks from tomorrow. Wow. I will be doing 2 presentations, Friday at 12 noon and Saturday at 1:15, each for an hour in the Explorer classroom. And I will be discussing building your first wooden boat. And what I'll be doing is using my eBook as a guide to kind of walk people through the process and decisions that you have to make in order to build your first boat, or should I say decisions that it would be good to make and planning that would be good to do before you build your first boat. Please check it out. If you can make it to one of my presentations, I would love that. If not, and you're going to be at the festival, I'd love to meet you. You can call me on my cell phone, 425-319-7800, or just look for me. I will have my scamp there, and I think I'm probably going to bring my sassafras canoe Chelan, and those will be right on the Commons area on the water side of the Northwest Maritime Center, and I'll be there with my Hooked on Wooden Boats t-shirt on and off throughout the day, so look me up. I'd love to meet you. We're going to move on to the interview with Jeff Hammond of the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building. So take it away, Jeff. Okay, so I have on the phone with me Jeff Hammond from the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building in Port Hadlock, Washington. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
And actually, this is your second visit. I did an interview with you last year, which went really good, so it's good to have you back.
Great. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, Jeff's been at the school since 1985 and does a great job there, senior instructor. And so as I mentioned to you, Jeff, I'm releasing an eBook this month, August of 2013, for first-time boat builders, wooden boat builders, and I'm discussing this kind of 6 basic methods of construction. One of them is Carvel planking, so I wanted to kind of talk to you about Carvel planking and get kind of your insight on that for people that are thinking about building a boat that way. Maybe we could start with a little description of Carvel planking, Jeff, and maybe any history that you know of.
Okay. Well, the history is, as far as we know, the Carvel planking was kind of first introduced by the Portuguese. You know, that's not an absolute, but the thought is that the Portuguese were the ones that kind of introduced the Carvel planking. Carvel planking basically is relatively narrow boards placed on a frame, either a sawn or a bent frame, edge to edge, and fashioned very firmly to the frames and in very close proximity to each other. And you rely pretty heavily on the quality of wood to swell in order for the planking to be tight. Theoretically, a Carvel plank doesn't need anything else but its simple swelling to tighten up the hull.
Okay, so swelling once a boat goes in the water and gets a little bit wet, is that right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nowadays, a more modern technique it's not real modern, but in the Carvel planking, we'll put caulking between the seams. It's thought that the caulking is the primary sealer of the planking. It's actually kind of a secondary function. It certainly does cause the planking to be more watertight, but its primary function is to create friction between the planks and have all the individual planks act like one big plank.
I see. And what is that caulking material typically made of, Jeff?
It's for thin planking up to about 1.5 inches thick. It's primarily cotton.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of raw cotton. It comes in various forms. Some of it looks like a real fluffy kind of cotton that's packed in, and others, like the English, have a version of that cotton that looks like bundles of kind of crude kite string.
Okay. And then is it put in? Is it soaked in anything before it's inserted between the planks?
Usually not. It's usually put in dry. It gets to be quite a mess if you soak it in something first. Once it's in place in the seam, it's primed. And usually you put a very thin down paint on it. You'd like to soak it, saturate it completely, because the raw cotton, of course, is real subject to mildew and rot. So you want to, after it's in place, after you've caulked it into place with a caulking iron and a mallet, you thin down some paint and scrub it in there with a kind of a stiff brush and try to saturate it as much as possible.
Okay, and caulking, not to be confused with caulking your bathtub where you're laying down a bead of silicone or something, right?
No, yes. No, it's not like that at all.
Yeah.
The other, since you asked the other form of caulking, the other version, you can use just about anything that you can kind of pack into the seams, but the other most common form of caulking material is what's called oakum. It's a kind of a much coarser strand, much coarser fabric than the cotton would be. That's for generally much bigger seams.
I see. Okay. So what kind of skill level would you say is required for building a boat of this type? Is this more advanced or more beginner, or how would you score that, Jeff?
Well, they all have their own special. All the different styles of planking have their very definite high level of skill required. Carvel is right up there near the top. A good planker in the heyday of wooden boat building was highly sought after and highly thought of in the boatyard. Mm-hmm. So it's a high level of skill, I would say.
Okay. And if I understand how it works correctly, is each plank really is custom fit edge to edge to the plank below and above and to the stern and the bow of the boat. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So you're putting on one piece at a time and custom fitting it to the boat.
Yes, pretty much. You use a process called spiling to determine the shape of the plank, and any bevels that might be on their edge need to be taken. So that you get as nice and tight edge-to-edge fit as possible.
Okay, and Carvel planking is pretty much always done with dimensional lumber. It can't really be done with plywood. Is that correct?
I've never seen it done with plywood. I would imagine maybe somebody's tried it, but I don't think it would be very successful.
Right, okay. So it's done with dimensional lumber. Okay.
Yeah.
And are there any special tools or equipment required for this type of building, Jeff?
It depends on how efficient you want to be, of course. Generally, a good bandsaw, large enough to deal with the planking that you are planking your boat with. A small little 13-inch bandsaw would work with some smaller boats, but you'd want a big, maybe a 36-inch bandsaw with a larger vessel, a 60 to 100 foot or in that range. Mm-hmm. So the bigger thicker the planking, the bigger the bandsaw is going to be required. Bandsaw is really critical. Really will speed up your process. Along with that, some nice sharp planes. Usually longer, less shapely planking, maybe a jack plane, for the smaller, more shapely planks, or more shapely planks in general, a smoothing plane, like a number 3 or number 4 smoothing plane. You also will need a backing out plane to hollow out the planks to fit on bent frames. And
does that backing out plane, that creates a concave surface on the inside, Jeff? So it'll go lay against the frame?
That's correct. Yes, it's a rounded sole plane, so that it's just exactly what you just described. It hollows out the back of the planks to conform to the curvature of the frames that you're planking over. On larger vessels, sawn frame vessels, many of them, the planks aren't hollowed out at all. You actually flatten off. You do what's called dubbing off the frames. You flatten off little sections of the frames to receive each plank so that you don't back them out.
I see. So that probably saves quite a bit of time on a big vessel, I would think.
I don't know. I think it's kind of a horse apiece. I'd almost rather back out the planks.
Really?
The dubbing out is not an easy job, not an easy task.
Oh, okay.
And you've got grain going in all different directions. And on a typical sawn frame, I think it's actually easier to back out the planks myself. So.
Okay. And then once you cut your planks, you back them out on the inside, and you install them on the boat. And then, do you have to fair the outside of the hull then, Jeff, or what do you do with the outside?
Yeah, the outside. Once the plank is complete or nearly complete, you can start to you obviously have a bunch of flat outside faces. You haven't done much of anything to the outside as the planks are fastened onto the boat. The inside has to be done, of course, but the outside is just a whole bunch of different facets for each individual orientation for each plank. And, of course, you want that to be smoothed up. And you'd use, for pretty much traditionally, a smoothing plane to do just that. You kind of knock the hard corners off first. And then over the course of days, in some cases weeks, make a whole big pile of shavings and make the hull nice and smooth.
I see. Okay.
And then finally, you sand it to get it ready for paint.
Okay. And in some places, caulking is called corking also. Is that right?
Yeah. It's the same thing. It's just a little easier to get out of your mouth. The word just comes out of your mouth a little bit easier when you say cork rather than caulk.
Yeah,
Caulk takes a little bit more effort. Yeah.
But it's basically the same thing. It's driving the cotton or oakum into the seams between the planks, right?
Yes, it's exactly the same thing. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, what about cost of building a Carvel planked boat versus other methods, Jeff? If there's any big differences there?
Well, if you're looking at traditional methods, it's probably traditional and also compared to maybe some of the more modern methods, it's probably one of the more, these days, especially with the cost of material, it's probably one of the more expensive planking methods these days. I don't know if I haven't really done a real thorough cost analysis of it compared to like strip planking or something like that. But it takes a lot of skill, so you're going to be paying a pretty highly skilled individual to do the work, and it also requires a very high quality material. So everything about Carvel planking is fairly expensive these days.
Okay. And so what is there any typical material that's used these days for Carvel planking, Jeff? Or what do builders look for in the material they're going to use?
Yeah, these days there's we're kind of having to switch gears on what kind of materials we use because we've kind of used up a lot of the native woods, a lot of the good native woods, or made them so expensive that we can't afford them anymore. Traditionally, over the course of the last 150 years or so, we would use a lot of Douglas fir for Carvel planking. Mm-hmm. Wonderful stuff to plank with. Nice to work with. Strong, moderately rot resistant, or rot resistant enough for this part of the world. Red cedar can be used for planking. Use a lot of that for Carvel planking. Port Orford cedar, yellow cedar. There was a time we could actually afford to Carvel plank with Honduras mahogany.
Wow.
There's been some planking done with other imported woods, of course. But the most common ones that have been used in the Northwest have been cedar fir. Get the cedars, I should say. Port Orford yellow, and red cedar, and Douglas fir. Nowadays, larch is used a lot for Carvel planking. Sapele, an African, they call it mahogany. It's used a lot for Carvel planking. Whatever we can get that seems to work well in the applications that we want to use it in.
So these are moderately hardwoods, Jeff?
Well, the Douglas fir isn't what I would call a hardwood at all. It's not a hardwood. It's an evergreen. Mm-hmm. And some of the other woods that we would use now would be more in the hardwood family. Like the sapele, I would imagine is a hardwood. Necessarily, oak has also been used in some, probably more East Coast.
Yeah.
For planking, that's definitely a hardwood.
You just planked your Davis boats in oak, right? White oak?
No.
Oh, you didn't?
No, we planked a couple of the Whitehalls that were built for the BBC in white oak.
Oh, okay. Right.
That was at their request. That was not a usual thing to do.
Okay.
Put it that way.
And so, when you're looking for lumber to plank your boat with, can you use flat grain wood? Do you need vertical grain? Does it matter?
We prefer either vertical grain or quarter sawn. Flat grain can be used on the bottom, maybe. The problem with flat sawn wood, in particular certain species, is it doesn't finish very well. You'll have big, wide areas of relatively soft winter wood, or late wood, it's called, and then little hard areas of winter wood. So it's difficult to get a really nice smooth finish with a flat sawn plank. Whereas VG, especially the old growth vertical grain or quarter sawn, the grain, the annual rings are so close together, it enables you to get a really nice smooth finish on the wood before you paint. Mm-hmm.
And so, are you looking for so many rings per inch, Jeff, on this stuff, on vertical grain?
Yeah, VG, we'd like to have old growth, first of all, if at all possible. That's getting more and more difficult. But we'd like to have somewhere between, probably on the low end, somewhere about on the low end, 8 rings per inch. On the upper end, for strength-wise, 8 to maybe 15, 16 rings per inch. I could get Douglas fir with 30 rings or more per inch. It's really beautiful to work with, but it's not as tough. It's not as strong, honestly.
Really?
As the lesser ring stuff, yeah.
Now, why is that, Jeff? That surprises me.
I don't know exactly what it is, but you can tell when you work the wood. It just doesn't. It just has a different ring to it. Has a different feel to it, and it sure is nice to work that 30 ring per inch stuff. Beautiful stuff to work, but it just isn't as tough, isn't as resilient.
Yeah.
As the coarser grain.
Yeah. Is there a difference between quarter sawn and vertical grain?
Well, vertical grain, the annual rings would be, for all practical purposes, at an orientation that'd be at a right angle to the surface, to the faces. And quarter sawn is going to be somewhere between that and maybe upwards of about a 45-degree angle.
I see.
And beyond 45, and you're looking at more flat grain, flat sawn-like material.
And what about rift sawn? What does that mean?
Rift sawn's the same as quarter sawn.
It is. Okay. Very good. Okay. All right. And so Carvel planking, is it best suited to any certain style or shape of boat?
Not in particular. They've Carvel planked some extremely bulbous bowed, I guess, mackerel head boats, with some difficulty.
Is it better for like rounded bilge boats or anything like that, Jeff? Or
it's just as well in a round bilge hull as it would be a hard chine.
I see.
Many hard chine boats built with Carvel planks. Those are quite easy to plank, actually. Hard chine boats. I don't know if it would be well suited, any better suited than any other form of planking. When you get to Lapstrake planking will require a certain shape for an individual plank, and you can't really alter that. But with Carvel planking, I can actually edge set planks into place a little bit and save myself some material. I can't do that with Lapstrake planking.
I see. Yeah, because you've got overlapping planks, basically.
I've got overlapping planks, and the Lapstrake planks being relatively thin compared to their width, don't like to edge set. They'll buckle. They'll do all kinds of crazy stuff. They fight you.
I see.
And Lapstrake plank or a Carvel plank, where the thickness starts to approach 30% of its width, you can bend on edge just almost as well as you can on the flat.
Okay. So maybe just kind of an overview here at the end, Jeff, of pros and cons of Carvel planked boats, and maybe any tips and tricks that you would have to offer for somebody that's going to build one.
Okay. All right. Pros and cons. The pros, relatively, really in the right hands, relatively easy and fast to put together. Like I said, it takes a fair amount of skill, but I can, if I have issues with my boat, an older boat, I almost never hesitate to pull a plank, because that's a relatively easy thing to pull and replace. One of the main cons about Carvel plank boats is they don't like to be out of the water. They like to go in the water and like to stay in the water. A Carvel plank small skiff, for example, if left out of the water, will dry up. You'll get big gaps between the planks. So they don't like to be out of the water. As opposed to like a Lapstrake boat is going to be more kindly to have out of the water for an extended period of time. They don't rely on the swelling as much as a Carvel plank hull would.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Definitely.
They're swelling. They need to swell, but they're swelling it in a different.
So they're happy in the water.
Yeah, they're happy in the water, not happy out of the water. They need to go in the water and stay in the water. That's the nice thing about the Northwest is the boats can stay in the water all year round around here. You pull them out once, better twice a year to do the bottom and put them right back in. A Carvel plank boat that needs to come out for an extended time to do repairs or restoration or whatever doesn't do well out of the water. It wants to stay in the water.
So I've heard, Jeff, and I don't know if this is correct or not, that wood that's in the water and stays in the water will last longer than wood that is wet and then dry and then wet and then dry. Is that right?
Well, it's more. There may be something to that, because usually when it's out of the water, you're more subject to freshwater condensation and things like that. You get freshwater condensation while the boat's in the water as well. The salt water, especially, is actually salt water will get into the wood is to a certain extent, for lack of a better word, kind of pickle it. It makes it less likely to have infestation of rot spores and cause and rot problems. Probably the worst thing you can do for a boat is not use it.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be. It needs that salt water sloshing around the bilge, and it needs the fresh air flowing through it on a regular basis. It needs you having a good hard look at it, on a regular basis, and taking care of issues little problems before they become big problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, like I say, the worst thing to do is just let the boat sit at the dock.
So cold salt water is a very good environment for a Carvel planked boat, whereas warmer or fresh water is not as friendly. Is that right? Or?
Yeah, fresh water is not kindly to wood boats at all.
Yeah.
It really isn't. You have to take particular care of a boat that it is used and stays in fresh water, especially. Fresh water is just not a great place for a wooden boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So any tips and tricks, Jeff, for people that are going to tackle this more advanced method?
Well, it's hard to put a lot of the tips and tricks into words.
Yeah. Well, they need to go to the wooden boat
I could
school.
give you is to come to school and learn how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking that myself.
Like I say, it's hard to verbalize the tricks. There's no trickery. It's just very careful attention to detail, and understanding how you use your tools is paramount to doing a good job. Mm-hmm. You can't be better than your tools.
Yeah,
you have to have good tools to start with, and know how to use them. Yeah,
and I'm assuming you learning to spile is pretty critical, I would think.
Learning to spile is essential for Carvel planking. Yes, yeah. It's an absolute must.
Mm-hmm.
For that kind of work.
Very good. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Jeff. Any parting comments you'd like to make?
Go out and have fun.
Okay, go build a boat, right? But maybe start with a stitch and glue boat, not a Carvel boat for your first one.
Yeah, you would start small and work your way up. Hone your skills on small stuff where the mistakes that you might make won't hurt too much, and work yourself up to the bigger stuff.
Okay,
gradually and slowly.
Very good. And if people are interested in getting a hold of the boat school there to talk about attending or going to a workshop, what's the best way to connect there?
Well, best way to call, or the best way to do it is just to call. And
you got the phone number handy, Jeff?
I've got the phone number, the area code 360-385-4948.
Cool. Very good. Well, thanks for your time today, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
All right, Dan. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Jeff, for doing that interview. It's always fun to hook up with you. What's kind of fun is Jeff and I are about the same age. Now, Jeff, if you're a lot younger or older than me, I apologize for saying that, but I'm making a little bit of an assumption there based upon how long you've been at the school and things like that. But Jeff and I both mountain bike, love mountain biking, although I'm sure Jeff is in a lot better condition than I am in, so we're always talking about mountain biking and stuff when we get together, and that's pretty cool. Again, next week is episode 100, so be sure and tune in for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. I would really enjoy it if you would connect with me by email, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. If you subscribe to my newsletter between now and September 9th, you'll get my eBook for free, which again is Get in the Wooden Boat Game, a guide for building your first boat. To subscribe, you need to go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe. You can leave comments on my blog, although today I looked and I don't see a comment section, so I think I'm having a technical difficulty and I'm going to try to get that fixed. You can find Wooden Boat Dan on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. Search for Wooden Boat Dan on those sites, and you can send me pictures and stories. If you'd like to support the podcast, if you go to my website, hookedonwoodenboats.com, on the right-hand side, I guess technically it's called the sidebar, there's advertisements for various companies. If you click on those and make purchases, I get paid a small commission. There's companies there like Amazon. There's the eBook of Russell Brown's. There's Jamestown Distributors, West Marine. Lots of resources there. I would really appreciate it if you would purchase through there, and I could make a little bit of money to help support my habit here. Also, I would appreciate it if you would give me a review in iTunes. If you go to the iTunes store from your computer, sorry about that being in the background, I've got my email on, I guess. You can search there in the podcast section for Hooked on Wooden Boats, leave me a review. I've got 43 reviews so far. 42 of those are 5-star. Okay, that's it for this week. Be sure and tune again next week for episode 100. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. God bless.